Hi guys, in today's video we're going to be doing a very simple investigation to do with density and the relationship between density and whether items sink or float. So this takes basically any outcomes examining floating and sinking in particular. So you need a variety of different substances. So I have water, alcohol in the form of surgical spirit, I have milk, maple syrup, honey, washing up liquid, and vegetable oil. These are the substances that I'm going to be using. And the object of this is to try and make a density column. So we're going to end up with a column of different materials with the most dense one on the bottom and the least dense one floating on top. So we should see them all nicely separated out. Now there's a couple of different ways of getting the kids to do this. Overall it's just a fun experiment, but how do we make it meaningful in terms of the learning? Well, I would start off by having a discussion about what density is. And the easiest way for kids to think about it is if you have two substances that are both taking up the same amount of space, but one of them weighs more than the other one. The one that weighs more must weigh more because it's more dense. The stuff in it is more tightly packed. You've packed more stuff into the same amount of space. Whereas the one that's lighter, you've got less stuff taking up the same amount of space. So it's all to do with the amount of mass crammed into a set amount of space. Okay, so that's what density is, and we need our learners to understand that first of all. But then how does it actually matter to this lesson? Well, we're going to be comparing different substances by trying to get them to float on top of one another. But you've got, in my mind, a couple of different ways of doing this. You could be really boring and just tell them which one's the most dense substance and which one's the least dense substance. And then they just go and do it procedurally. And all they've done there is basically, you've given them an assertion and they've tested it and proved whether it's true or false. And that is a way of doing it. So taking an assertion and testing it, that's perfectly valid. But I think it's often more engaging for them if they're actually conducting the investigation themselves. So here's a way of doing that, and that's what I'm going to do here. Because actually, to be honest, I can't remember what order they go in. So by doing an investigation, hopefully we should arrive at the correct conclusion. Now, we've agreed already that density is to do with the amount of mass, the amount of weight that something has in a set amount of space, how much stuff is crammed into a set amount of space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use set volumes of each of these liquids here. And I'm going to measure that volume in a container and then determine how much it weighs. So let's start off with water here. I've gone for 20 milliliters. In fact, that can't be the water. All right, wait. Helps if you colour them. I have actually got food colouring to do that. That one's not the water. This is the water. I'm measuring the water. That's coming up to 19 grams. So the water is weighing 19 grams. So obviously just shy of 20 milliliters there, but near enough. So 20 milliliters of water is roughly 19, 20 grams. Okay. What about the ethanol then? So here's 20 milliliters of ethanol, surgical spirit, here. 20 milliliters of that. That's coming in at 14 grams. 14, 15, teetering a wee bit there. Okay. So that tells us that the water is more dense there and the ethanol is less dense. Right. I've got a couple of other substances and then I'm going to have to manually measure out the rest of them. This is maple syrup here. That's coming in at 28 grams, so that's more dense. This is honey. That's a whopping 32 grams, so that's very definitely dense there. So we've got the most dense at this side and the least dense at this side. Okay, so now I'm going to have to take a little bit of time here. Sorry if this slows me up a little bit, but I'm going to have to manually measure out the others. So let's do a little bit of milk here. That's zeroed. It is now. So 20 milliliters of milk. That's 21 grams. So just a shade, according to this, just a shade heavier than the water. So we'll put that there just now. I can't remember if that is supposed to be the case or not, but we'll try the other couple. So washing up liquid. looking for 20 mils of this. Now this is tricky because that one seems to also be 20 grams. So these two seem to be quite similar. So this is where we might encounter a little bit of a problem there, a little bit of a puzzle to try and work out. Lastly then, we'll do some vegetable oil, if I can get it open. 20 mils of this. That's coming in at 13 grams there. Okay. So that is the least dense one. So what we have is a variety of substances in order. Now, if I wanted to work out which one of these was really more dense than the other, I could actually just increase the amount of it, as long as they were both equal. So I could measure up to 100 mils, and then the difference should become more pronounced. But what I've realised I've done is I've actually gone slightly over the amount there. So I'm actually going to put that down this end. I'm going to say it's more dense, and this is less dense here. But I might need to actually check this in a second to double check that I've got this the right way around. But ultimately, all I'm going to do is I'm going to mix them together in here now. So mixing them together in the correct order, we should get our density column starting to form. So I'm going to do this fairly quickly. And the reality is you can't really do this quickly if you want it to work well. But I'm rushing just for the fact that this is a video. So I'm just going to stagger them one on top of the other. So I'll put a bit of honey in, we'll put the maple syrup in. You want to be quite slow and steady with it if it's going to work well. Although they should sort of even out over time. I'm going to add just a wee bit more of the maple syrup there. Now this is probably not going to be the best one that you've ever seen, but hopefully it's a new way of doing it for you that makes the learning a little bit more valid. So there's the maple syrup. Now the order here, this is where I'm feeling a bit unsure. I'm going to put the milk on first. And that is floating on top of that, so that's good, that's something at least. Now, I have the distinct feeling that I might have got the order wrong here, and I do know that fairy liquid and milk don't normally mix very well anyway, but if I'm very slow with it, it might work, and that is floating to the top. A little bit of mixing there, but it's probably because I'm doing it too fast, but yeah, the fairy liquid does seem to be floating here. I'm going to add a bit more in. Slow and steady. I don't think I'm being slow enough, which is why they're mixing, but there's a bit of a separation of the two of them there. But of course here we've got a detergent and we've got a fat, which they don't mix well together. They react chemically, which is why this probably isn't working as well. Next we had the water. Let's add a little bit of red food colouring to that, just to hopefully make it stand out a little bit more. A little bit of water here. And our ones all, because I'm doing it too fast, I'm not being delicate enough, they are all merging a little bit. But given enough time, they should separate out. We've got the ethanol next, which I'll add blue food colouring to, but again, if I don't put it in delicately enough, which I'm not going to, I'll probably all just merge a little bit. But hopefully you're getting the idea behind it. So if we just add this very delicately here. So that is floating to the top. I will say this is probably the messiest density column I've ever done, but it's because I'm on time pressure here. And lastly, the vegetable oil, which should very comfortably float to the top, which it is. I just haven't got enough of it. I'll add a wee bit more. Now, even if they don't, oh, far too much, far too quickly. Even if they don't all mix together perfectly immediately, they should start to separate out over time, which they're starting to do. So the layers that got a little bit confused here were the milk and the washing up liquid. They may separate out over time, they may not, but the other layers are relatively clear. So we can see honey, the most dense, going up through maple syrup, the other three a little bit mixed in, followed by the alcohol and the vegetable oil. And we did it rather than them just being told what chemicals to mix together in what order. Instead, they actually determined for themselves which ones were the most dense and which ones were the least dense, just by weighing them. And I think that is a far more effective way of learning about density and what density actually means. Give it a shot. Cheers.